All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm here with Emmanuel Thompson of the Prospect MMA podcast. This is going to be the first episode of the Irish MMA update. So, Emmanuel, I kind of want, since this is the first one we've done, not the first time I've talked to you, but the first one we've done this episode, maybe tell people who you are if there's people out there that maybe don't know.
Okay, so Emmanuel Thompson, like you said, Prospect MMA podcast. I hope it's visible and you can see it. I've been running this podcast since November 2020, and I literally started the podcast with the intent of giving a spotlight to all the local fighters from Ireland to the UK as well, to a certain extent, and mainly cover the fighters from the amateur ranks all the way until they turn pro and obviously break onto the scene um, in the major leagues. So that when people, and then I'm talking more about the casuals, when they hear a name for the first time, whether it's the UFC or Bellator or something, they already heard it from me before that, and hopefully they have been following their careers prior to that happening.
Now, has that happened with some fighters already, like Ian Gary, maybe, or some of those?
Yes, it has happened with a few, yes. Which obviously, um, yeah, we can go. Ian Gary, I obviously covered him before he was even in the UFC. When he was in the Cage Warriors doing his run towards the welterweight title, yeah, which he won and defended. Sorry, he won. He's not defended because he went on to the UFC. Yeah. Paul Hughes, another great example, got a featherweight title in Cage Warriors as well. Reese McKee, who was the original guy that made me start the podcast when he had his debut against Khamzat Chimaev in the UFC. And I didn't know who he was. That's what kind of sparked the idea to start the podcast. So since that, having him on the podcast, watching him fight live, he headlined he headlined the Cage Warriors show in Belfast, which is 30 minutes from where I live. So it was amazing to watch that fight live. He's fighting again now in Dublin, which we can talk about later. There's a few prospects on that card that I want to let you know about. Um, but yeah, there has definitely been a few. Again, there's a few guys on that card that are making the debut at Cage Warriors. Um, that I have been following them since they were amateurs. Um, I'll let you know another name, Ryan Shelley. I literally covered them as I had started the podcast. The first event that was happening was Clan Wars behind closed doors. This was during the pandemic, so there was no live crowds allowed. So I had to watch it from home like everybody else. And there was this guy called Ryan Shelley, um, who got a beautiful submission in the second round, and that was his last amateur fight. Had him on the podcast after that. He announced on the podcast he was going pro. 2 years later, he's now 6-0 as a pro, and he's going now for the 7-0 at Cage Warriors. So that's one example of one of the fighters that I had the pleasure of catching him at that specific turning point of their career from amateur to pro. Yeah.
So now, before we start, maybe talk about you're going to PFL next weekend. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, cool. So, um, obviously, parts of having the podcast and parts of doing this kind of media work and giving exposure to the fighters, and by default, you're always promoting the events, right, that they are competing at. Now, with most of my work, 90% of my podcasts are towards the amateur scene. So most of the guests that I have will be amateurs. And obviously more and more of that, more of those amateurs are turning pro. So with time, that's going to change. So there will be a turning point, I imagine, where 50% will be amateurs and 50% will be pro, but we're not there yet. But as a product of that, I started getting invitations to cover the local shows, the amateur shows, which normally have like, one or two pro fights at the top, the main event, co-main event. Um, Started doing that. Apparently, I do a good job, if I say so myself, obviously. Doing interviews with the fighters, capturing, cage side footage, all that stuff. And then I decided to, try and apply for the big shows. So Bellator was the first one that I applied. I got denied for that one. So then I got hired by MMA Ireland to go on their behalf. So I went to Bellator Dublin. After that, I applied for Cage Warriors uh, under my own name, which I got. I got that media credential, which was huge for me. Um, and then applied again for Bellator under my name, got that one. So this was the first Bellator that I went under the Prospect MMA podcast, and I obviously chanced and did the same with PFL and see what the response was, and then it was a positive response. I imagine because they saw that I went to Bellator. I imagine. I don't know if that's the case or not, but either way, they've accepted my media credentials. So I'm going to be flying out on Saturday, next Saturday, to Newcastle upon time to go to the Bertie Motors Arena where PFL is going to take place. And yeah, I'm going to be covering that event, which is awesome.
Are they paying for you to go out, or do you pay yourself?
No, unfortunately, this is all self-funded, right? But the way I see it is, I'm working towards getting that UFC media credential, right? And I don't know if you keep an eye on this, but the tickets for the UFC, for example, are, I think they were selling for like 700 pounds. The ones for the UFC London, that just happened yesterday. So if I can get the media credential, then as a fan, I'm saving like a ton of money. You know what I mean? Like the ones from Bellator Dublin that just happened a few weeks back. They were 300 and odd pounds for the front seat, and I got to go for free. So as a fan, I can't really ask anymore. It's money that I would spend, as a fan to go and watch, but instead I'm getting it for free. So in some sort of a way, I'm getting paid. I'm getting paid by not spending that money myself, I guess.
Now, so what's the first kind of big news item you think that you want to discuss on this first episode?
Okay, so I think the biggest thing that I can bring light is the Ultimate Fighter season 31. So if you don't mind, we can start there. Michael Sandler is going to be going head to head with Conor McGregor. And I don't know if you are aware of week one when doing the picks, Conor McGregor actually let go of a few guys from the original roster, and he brought his own guys into the roster. So I'd like to tell you about the two guys specifically that he brought in to get on the team. So one guy is Brett Katona, which you may be familiar with the name. I don't know if you are. Have you heard of him?
No, no, I'm not familiar.
Okay, so Brett Katona has actually competed in the Ultimate Fighter. I'm gonna say season 27. If I can share the screenshots, which I was trying to see. Let me see. I think it's this way. Allow access, and then I'll give you my screenshot here. Let me know if this works.
Yeah, I see something behind you. Yeah,
Can I
Bracketone.
reverse this image now? No. There, page 31, UFC 2 and 2, and yeah, he won season 27. So he was the winner of season 27, right? Um, and
There's so
then
many of them; it's hard to keep up sometimes.
yeah, that's true, that's true. But he won at bantamweight season 27. Um, I believe then he had like two losses back to back, and they let him go, something like that. So then he transitioned to Brave Combat Federation, where he went on a 4-fight win streak, fought for the title, and won the title at Brave Combat Federation. So he's now 12-2 as a professional fighter. And yeah, so he's back on the Ultimate Fighter season 31 at bantamweight. And the other guy,
now, is he on Connor's team back in Ireland or no?
Yes, he trains at SPG Ireland. Yes, he's originally from Canada, if I'm not mistaken, but he has moved to Ireland something like 5 or 6 years ago. I had his wife on the podcast. His wife is a professional fighter for Invicta. So I had his wife on, and we spoke about that obviously. Let me just share the other one again. Apologies for being in reverse. I did not know that was the case, and I don't know how to reverse.
No, it's fine. It's fine the way it is.
Let me see. Does that work? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that straight for you?
Yep.
Okay, so Lee Hammond, 5-0. He was fighting at Bellator. So the first Bellator that I went, I saw him going 3-0. So that was his third professional fighter, as it says there, in February 2022. After that, he fought in a few other European promotions. One was in Malta, I believe, and one was somewhere else, like Romania or something. But yeah, he's 5-0 now. He's a lightweight. Huge prospect. Huge prospect. Oh, sorry about that. How do you do that? There you go. Okay. This is me not being very technical minded. Yeah, so Lee Hammond, another name to keep an eye out. So 5-0, trains at SPG Ireland as well with Conor McGregor. And yeah, so he's going to be in the lightweight team, I guess. Yeah, because they have two teams, right? One for the bantamweights and one for the.
So he only pulled two guys, really.
Yeah, those are the two that I know. I know that he cut Chris Moutinho from the bantamweight pit, which is the guy with the green hair that Sean O'Malley completely pieced up. Used him as a punching bag, which, with no disrespect, is kind of a favor to the guy because his next fight wasn't any better. And then I don't know who the other cut was, but whoever happened to be, I imagine he's from the lightweights. Yeah.
So you know of two of them. The other two are kind of been kept under the hat, so to speak.
There's another name, Kian Colley, and I looked into him, but he's 5-5, and he's a welterweight. So I can't imagine that he got him to join the team. He might have come on as a coach. So I'm not 100% on that, and that's why I didn't want to bring him up. But those two have been confirmed 100% beyond any doubt. Conor McGregor even spoke on the Ariel Shawani show about how the slap incident between him and Michael Chandler, whatever happened to be, was because of Lee Hammond. Because Conor has been training Lee Hammond since he was an amateur. So he's like one of Conor's proteges. So yeah, so whatever happened there, it must have got really personal or something. And somebody got slapped, and there you go.
Yeah.
Around Conor things happen. So that's that. So in regards to the Tough 31, which is going to start in May the 30th, I believe, it's when it starts airing. So keep an eye for those two names, Lee Hammond and Brad Katona. I'm not saying they are winning the season. I don't know, but keep an eye on those two names. Yeah, for sure.
With Conor coming back to Ultimate Fighter, is there any chatter in Ireland? Do you hear do people talk a lot about this, or like average people, not people like you and me, just regular people?
No, not much. No, I think, and being totally honest here, from what I know outside of the MMA scope, so like it's a bit weird. Inside the MMA community, everybody loves him and what he did for the community. Outside of it, most people hate him. They think he brings a bad name to Ireland. and that he brings, bad reputation to the
Mm.
Irish and all this and that stuff. But those people are like, again, uneducated. They have no idea how much he changed the mixed martial arts scene, especially in Ireland. It's like night and day. Again, I can use my own podcast as a reference. From all the fighters that I had on the podcast, and I've done over 500 episodes at this point, I can say safely 80% of them give me the same answer, which is they started MMA because of Conor McGregor. Ian Gary being one example of those. He started when he was 14. He saw Conor McGregor, started MMA, and now he's in the UFC talking to Conor McGregor. So yeah, so the guy has been like a huge influence, and again, he's loved by the community of MMA. And yeah, outside of it, it's not really
It's interesting
talked
though,
about.
because most of us, in the US and other countries, we don't know this stuff, like the vibe in Ireland, the community in Ireland. So you're saying like the average person isn't really into Conor McGregor's antics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Your
yeah.
average citizen
You know
isn't too
why?
high on his behavior.
I think it's because of the media, right? And I'm not talking about MMA media. I'm talking about the newspapers and the news on TV. Every time they have a news about Connor, it's because he was arrested. It's because he done cocaine or he was partying here or there or
Mm.
violence here, or, attacked a guy in the bar. Like the guy hasn't done any favors to himself. I totally get that. He has got himself in some like really stupid, incidents and stuff. Um, and that's what people hear, right? That's what they remember, right? For the average person that does not follow the sport whatsoever, they don't see it on the news. Oh, Conor McGregor, first double champ, this and that stuff. Like all that probably goes over their head, right? But then, oh, he attacked the guy in the pub. Okay, yeah, he's an asshole. Oh, he did this or that. Oh yeah, he's an asshole, and so on. So that's what people hear, and that's why they get a negative opinion. So it is what it is, I guess.
It's interesting. But you haven't heard any rumors about the Ultimate Fighter at all?
No, not yet.
No, they do a good job of keeping stuff. They used to
Yeah,
not. They used to not do a good job of, but now they're doing a really good job of keeping all that kind of squashed.
this is what I heard. If you leak anything else whatsoever, you're out of the show, you're out of UFC, and it's like you're never coming back ever. So, would you want to risk anything over that? Like, I know I wouldn't. I would keep my mouth shut. Like, I would not tell my wife or kids or anybody whatsoever. You
Yeah,
know what I
it's
mean?
like they even keep all the hearsay out. They used to not, like I said, they
Exactly.
used to not do a good job of that. But now it's like
Yeah.
they're really good at keeping that
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
tightened up.
exactly. If I was the UFC, I would be releasing the episodes on a weekly basis. You know, I'll do my best to kind of like do a week behind. So whatever happened last week, try and put the episode out this week, and whatever happens this week, put the episode out next week, and so on. And I think that would be the best way. Or even just get a bunch of cameras in the house, like Big Brother style, and just have like a live stream going on continuously under the UFC Fight Pass, and people can just go on it anytime they want and just see what's happening. I think that would be cool, but that's not that's not the question you're asking here, I guess.
So what would be the next item that you want to talk about? I know we
Okay,
saw Ian
so
Gary recently in the UFC. Is that what you were going to talk about next or something
no,
else?
I wasn't. Just because I wanna cover like the people that are going under the radar, if that makes sense. So like we all know Ian Gary, he's in the UFC. We all know Conor McGregor, he's in the UFC. You don't need me to talk about those guys. You already know them. So
Did you interview him on your show, Ian Gary?
never, never,
Okay.
never. I just spoke to him in the DMs and stuff. I had an interview scheduled with him before the shit went down with this team. So okay, let me just give some context. whenever he was fighting for the welterweight title at Cage Warriors, the week of that fight, his team released him, and they weren't going to help him with anything from the weight cut to cornering. Like the guy was alone pretty much, and he had to go and fight that welterweight title with no corner man or anything like that. Now, Paul Hughes, being a personal friend from me and Gary, and being from a totally different team, he offered to hold the towel and hold the bottle and give him the towel and the water bottle in between rounds and stuff like that, and give him advice based on him as a fighter, and um, after him winning the welterweight title, then he canceled the interview because we were supposed to have a post fight interview, but obviously things went on with this team and all that, and he needed some time and this and that stuff. Then after that, he got into the UFC, and things kind of took off for him, and yeah, we never got that interview done. So yeah, that's the one that got away, I guess.
Do you know why his team? What was behind that? Did you hear anything?
Um, I do know the reasons, but I'll talk specifically on what the official reason is and not what I know in addition to it. But what happened was his girlfriend or fiance wife. I think I think he's married now, right? His wife, I think it is, yeah. Um, which at the time was his girlfriend, yes, Layla. She wanted to be on his corner for the fight, which meant because this was during pandemic times, Cage Warriors stipulation was you can only have two corner men to keep things small, and reduce the risk of coronavirus transmission and all that. So she was saying, and she was asking Ian, can I be in the corner with you? Which then meant that instead of his two coaches, he would have to drop one of them and have her. And from my understanding, he put that across to his coach and he says, this has to happen. I want her in my corner for this fight. The coach said, that's not happening. Absolutely not. And whatever happened in addition to that escalated to the point where the coach was like, okay, you're out of the team. I'm having none of this pretty much. And yeah, he was released from Team KF at the time, and that was that. So he was then fighting under his own name, so as an independent fighter, competing for that welterweight title.
But where did he end up after that?
So then he moved into the US. So once he got signed to the UFC, he moved into the US, and he's training under Stanford. So he's with all the, like Kevin Lee, and I think Michael Chandler trains there, and Gilbert Burns, and so on, like all them guys. That's a big gym, big gym.
What part of Ireland is he from?
Dublin, Dublin,
Hmm,
yeah.
that's interesting.
So Team KF is one of the teams that were part of SPG. So the coaches were part of SPG, and then whenever, and again, this is public information. It's on the Paddy the Hooligan Houlihan's book, which I read. I have a signed copy by him. He explains the story as whenever they started uh, opening up more SPG gyms, right? So you have like the SPG HQ, you have SPG Charlestown, SPG Swords, and so on and so forth. He then started asking like what do you call it, like the franchises from like McDonald's and stuff. He was asking every gym to pay, I think 5,000 is what it says on the book. So like 5,000 a year, they have to pay SPG just to use the name SPG. So Team KF, those two coaches, they were like, we ain't doing that. We're gonna then change the name from SPG to our own name, and that's where Team KF came from. But uh, the guys running it, legit professional fighters. They One of them used to be the light heavyweight champion of Cage Warriors, competed in KSW and a number of other promotions as well. Proper team.
That's interesting. Now, what'd you say the next story is going to be that you wanted to report on?
So the next story has to be Danny McCormack. I don't know if you follow Invicta FC. That's a all women's mixed martial arts company, the only all women's mixed martial arts company in the world, to my knowledge. And Danny was fighting for the flyweight.
There's
Sorry,
one other. I got to stop. Valkyrie is the other one. So there is one other
is there?
women's show. Valkyrie fighting. Yeah.
Oh wow, okay. Do they do MMA as well?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
nice. Okay. Is it professional or
yeah.
amateur?
No, it's professional.
Oh, okay. Where is it based, by the way?
I want to say California. I think they just had a show this weekend, I believe.
Oh, cool. Okay. I didn't know that. So Danny McCormack was fighting for the 115-pound title. So that's strawweight, right? Strawweight title. She got a decision, and she became the first ever Irish Invicta champion. Yeah, that's a big one. She's 7-2 now as a professional fighter, also coming out of SPG Ireland. Under the same card, though, which obviously to set up the storyline, there was a girl called Shauna Bannon competing as well. She goes by Mama Bear, her fighting name. Um, she's 5-0 now, so she also won. Prior to these fights being made, though, she was calling out Danny because she was saying there can only be one Queen of Ireland. So she wanted to fight Danny to then set herself up to fight for the title. But Invicta gave Danny the title fight. They gave Shauna someone else to fight. They both won. Danny became the champion. And it looks like Invicta is coming to Ireland for the first time. And it's going to be headlined by these two um, Irish competitors, two strawweights. So Sean is 5-0, and Dan is 7-2, current champion of Invicta. So keep an eye on those two as well. I gotta say, yeah, really, really good fighters.
Do you have any idea when that might happen, or is it just something that's in the talks?
It literally just happened this weekend, so it's in the talks. But the president, I forget her name, so
Shannon
forgive me.
Knapp. Shannon Knapp is her name.
There you go. She has alluded that yes, she will consider doing Ireland, Invicta Ireland for sure. Like, so she said something like, what Dana White says, yes, we are in talks, like, yeah,
We'll see what
hopefully
happens.
that, yeah, exactly. Most of the events are always in the US, right? For Invicta. So, uh, but now they have a really good reason to bring it over to Ireland. Like, all the events sell out pretty much. There's no MMA event that doesn't sell out, and that's why Bellator keeps coming every year. Twice a year, and Scott Cooker was talking about maybe even adding a third show a year. So yeah, things are going well as far as selling MMA events over here. So, yeah, I don't see why not for Invictus.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, you went to the most recent Bellator Ireland card, right? So
Mm-hmm.
kind of talk about Bellator in Ireland. You were kind of speaking about that earlier, but just a moment ago, but it looks like Bellator is going to be more active in Ireland.
Yeah. Again, if you go and look at the latest card, uh, it is kind of on purpose, right? But I'm going to say 80% of the card, you have at least one Irish fighter on either side um, of the bout, at least one. So um, those cards are always stacked with Irish fighters. I do get it why they get the pound for pound best crowd in the world. You know, like it's amazing, amazing to be in that environment and to watch it and witness in person. Um, and yeah, and Scott was saying something like that. You know, it's amazing the reception they always get every time that they come back. Um, and the fighters are loved by the fans, and the fans love the sport. And yeah, it's just amazing.
Do you know if they had a partnership with like a local gym like SBG or something that kind of
There
led
seems
to
to
them?
be something like that. Yeah, there seems to be something like that going on. I was talking to PC Carroll, and he has showed me a tweet from like 2 or 3 years ago, where John Kavanagh was um, explaining how he suggests matchups to Bellator, and then obviously Bellator puts them together or not, you know. So, but if you go and watch most of the cards and most of the Irish fighters on that card, they are SPG fighters, you know. So there seems to be something going on as far as a partnership goes with Bellator. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were pushing James Gallagher pretty hard.
Yes. 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 Obviously. Yes. With reason. With reason. The guy is good. Just because he's on a losing, you know, in the last what is it? The last couple of fights, right? He lost
Yeah.
the last couple of fights. Yeah. You know, he's still good. He's still good. And he's young. He's young. You know, so he still has a good future, I would say.
So how many more stories do you have here? Just so I know.
Okay, so we had Invicta and Shauna. Okay, so now I was gonna get into the Bellator portion. So this last Bellator, a few names to point out. So Dara Kelly, again, I've been following this guy from amateur. He went 9-0 as an amateur, finishing all his 9 fights, never went to distance. Turns pro at Bellator, finishes the fight. Second fight goes to decision for the first time in his life, and now he's a third professional fight. He got another finish, so he's on a 12 fight win streak right now, with 11 of them being by finish. So remember this name, Dara Kelly. This is a name that's I believe going to make waves in the MMA world coming up. Another guy, Kenny Mokawana. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. The Black Diamond. 5-0 as a professional fighter. 5 finishes. You know, and again, I've been following this guy since he was an amateur. The first ever show that I went to doing media cover, that was his pro debut, which was Clan Wars. Um, so yeah, like it's amazing for me to watch guys like this coming up and smashing the pro scene now. So that's two pro fighters that are undefeated. The other one is Kieran Clark, 7-0, also got a decision win at Bellator. Um, and he makes a point of saying every single decision he's been on, he always gets a 10-8 round. So there you go, Kieran. I said that. Then you have guys like Richie Smullen, which you probably heard of the name. He was in the Ultimate Fighter as well in the UFC, but he lost obviously, so he didn't win that season. So he went outside of the UFC again, and he keeps on winning. So he's 10-2 now. And again, this was his comeback to Bellator. So this last fight was his comeback to Bellator. And then there's another guy called Carl Moore, who's a light heavyweight. He's been calling for Yoel Romero after this fight. He's 11-2. And yeah, he's hoping to fight Yoel Romero after, which I found it very interesting. If they make that fight, yeah, it will be very interesting. Besides that, I can then get onto the Cage Warriors card, unless you have any questions about the names that I mentioned here. If you want to ask anything.
Um, where do you feel like most of the fighters are coming out of in Ireland? Is there like one gym that's dominating, like SBG, or is it several?
There's a few names that that come to mind. So SPG being one, obviously, you have to mention SPG. Then you have Team KF is another great gym. Um, so that's the gym that Ian Gary came from, right? You have Next Generation, which is where Reese McKee is training at. Um, Norman Park. I don't know if you remember the,
Yeah.
the name. Yeah. So he's from the same gym as Reese McKee. Um, Shout out to him. He was fighting last weekend as well. So he's still fighting at 36, I think. And he got another win at the Hexagon in France, which is the first event, professional event of that promotion, Hexagon. So shout out to them for running a great event in France, which is, I don't know if you know, MMA was totally illegal in France and now became a legal thing. So that's like huge step for them. But yeah, so Norman Park was part of that event. So you have Next Generation, which is the only gym in the north of Ireland that has produced UFC fighters. So being Norman and Reese McKee, the only two from the
I think
north.
they're
And
affiliate
then,
of Chris Brennan, probably. Chris Brennan started Next Generation in the US.
oh, okay, you know
Yeah,
more than
Chris
me.
Brennan was a guy who fought in the old school, like very early on. Um,
Right, okay.
he was one of the first guys who really pushed a no-gi. Maybe
Right.
he might be one of the
I
first guy,
know
maybe the first guy,
I know
actually.
that Rodney Moore is personal friends with Dean Lister. Is Dean Lister connected
Yeah,
to?
yeah, and no, not Next Generation, but Chris Brennan was a guy who actually trained with McGregor a little bit. I know McGregor brought him in for
Right.
early, maybe before what's his face came in, Dylan Dennis.
Oh yes.
He brought Chris Brennan in.
Don't say that name.
Yeah.
Let's just pretend that guy doesn't exist.
But he has a gym
Mhm.
called Next Generation, and I think the one you're talking about is an affiliate of it. And I know Patty Pimblett trains at a Next Generation gym also.
Yes, the Liverpool affiliation. That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So this one is the Ballymena one. So and again, it was very funny to me when Bruce Coffer is announcing Reese McKee from Ballymena, Northern Ireland. And if you ever seen that meme of the guy eating the cereal and then he's like spitting, that was me whenever it's like, what? There's a guy like 40 minutes away from me in the UFC and I didn't know whatsoever. Like, yeah, that was crazy to me. So yeah, so Next Generation, SPG, Team KF, and I'm gonna say Team Rhino. Um, yeah, I'm gonna say those four teams are are the top four, I would say, out of Ireland right now. Ireland and Northern Ireland. Fight Academy Ireland as well, which is where Paul Hughes trains at, and Reese McKee goes there as well to train sometimes. Um, Paul Hughes is not a UFC fighter yet, but whenever he gets signed, that will then become the second gym in Northern Ireland to have a UFC fighter. So, but for now, it's only Next Generation.
So SPG is Southern Ireland. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
SVG, Team KF, and Team Rhino, they are all in the south. And then Next Generation and Fight Academy Ireland are both in the north.
Is there any rivalry between North and South?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think
Oh
so.
yes.
Yeah.
You know the Peter Quilly song, "Zombie" from the Cranberries. If you ever go watch on YouTube or anywhere for the video clip, it's all about the war between the North and the South,
Right.
and when the streets were being like closed off and there was like tanks on the streets and soldiers everywhere were like AK-47s or whatever the weapons happen to be, and yeah, riots and shit, and people dying left and right, and bombs being planted. Yeah, it was dark, dude. It was dark. Um, Hopefully, the Good Friday Agreement stays, and hopefully those times stay behind us. But as far as the rivalry goes, there is still that Protestant versus Catholic kind of thing. And you're asking like totally the wrong guy to explain this because I'm from Portugal. I obviously moved over here, but um, you know, I put the pieces together, and obviously I spoke to a bunch of people about this and this and that just to try and understand more the history between the North and the South and all that. But there's a lot of people from the North that feel like there should be a united Ireland. Um, in my understanding, the people in the South don't even care that much. It's more like the people in the North that care to say that this is a totally different country and we belong to the UK and this is Great Britain and all that stuff. But yeah, feel free to edit this part out because this is like going into politics and stuff.
No, I
And
mean,
I'm literally
if it
not the
spilled
right guy
over
to.
into MMA is what I meant. Like, is there an MMA rivalry between North and the South?
There is some, yes. Yeah, that there is some. You see, in the north, there's only a few fighters that will actually go out with the Northern Irish flag, you know, um, and then everybody else just goes out with the Irish flag, the yeah, the South flag. Um, but again, most of the MMA community is all cool, if that makes sense. So they're all like very supportive of each other and they understand that they need each other to get better, so yeah, yeah, maybe there's not, I don't know. Yeah, again, I'm not the right person to be asking this and to be answering this. So, yeah, my perception could be the wrong perception, if that makes sense. So like whatever I see and think could be totally off from what is actually happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I knew there was a big soccer rivalry back in the days, between like, you know,
Yeah.
different factions. And then you had like a militant faction, I don't remember
Yes.
what they were called, like the IMF or something. I
Well,
forgot.
there's the IRA, UVF, UDF, UFF, and I'm sure there's more.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I know. Yeah. IRA being the big one in the South.
Yeah, IRA. Yeah, yeah.
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 Yeah. You
It's
even
crazy.
see in the Sons of Anarchy and stuff like that. Yeah. But
So
yeah.
what other stories did you have that you wanted to discuss?
Okay. So the last one is going to be about the Cage Warriors, right? So there's the Cage Warriors going to come up where Rhys McKee is going to be defending his title. Um, so I obviously want to give a shout out to Rhys McKee. He's 12-4, right? Two of those losses being obviously the losses in the UFC, one being Khamzat Chimaev, which nobody fucking knew the kind of monster that guy was.
Hmm.
And Rhys McKee took that fight on 6 days' notice, had to travel all the way to Abu Dhabi and take care of papers and this and that stuff, and obviously got smashed by Khamzat. Um, so 12-4, and still all 12 fights by finish. You know, this guy he literally comes to kill you or be killed. It's one or the other, and it's gonna happen either way. So yeah. So shout out to him. He's defending his title now. I do believe after this title defense, if successful, he then gets back on the UFC. Like
They
if
were high
nobody
on
else.
him. I mean, going into that match, they said, "Hey, both of these guys are legit guys." The UFC was pretty high on
Yeah,
McKee going into that fight.
absolutely. But like he was 10-2 at the time that this happened. 10-2. He was going to fight for the welterweight title at the time. Kamzat was 6-0, I believe, right? Um, so there's a total legit reason to match these two and say Reese McKee is really good. He is. The thing is, they just got him on 6 days' notice, where obviously not making any excuses. You know, Kamzat obviously had the training camp to fight the week before Reese McKee. So for those who don't know, Kamzat had his debut in 1 week and then fought the week after that. And he was the first guy to fight 7 days back to back and get wins back to back, right? So that training camp was to fight the guy at middleweight, which he did, and then he did a weight cut to fight Reese McKee at welterweight, um, where Reese McKee just got like the call, "Oh, do you want to come into the UFC and fight this guy?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And he said on the podcast after that he hadn't even been training for the past 6 weeks or something. He said because he had like a,
Yep.
I'm gonna say a knee injury. Don't quote me on this because I can't remember. Like, this interview was done 2 years ago, so forgive me if I get the detail incorrectly. But he had some sort of injury, so he hadn't been training for the past 6 weeks. But he literally said like, "I'm not gonna pass on the call from the UFC. I'm just not." So for him, it was just like, I got to go and do this on 6 days' notice. Whatever happens, happens. But I'm in, and then I can have a chance to, obviously any fight, you always have that chance of knocking somebody out. And he has so many knockouts in his career that, he knows he has the knockout punch power, like he just did to Justin Borlo on his title fight. He knocked him out with a straight punch. Um, he had knocked out people with head kicks. So the guy has knockout power, legit knockout power. So, he's not wrong to think, okay, I can knock this guy out even without any training. I can still do it. Yeah. And then the next fight, I'll have time to prepare and this and that stuff. But yeah, he lost by decision his next fight, and then they cut him, which I thought was very unfair. They should have got him another chance. But yeah, hopefully now he gets that chance after defending his title, and the UFC brings him back. And yeah, after that, I think you will see a great Reece McKee reemergence into the UFC. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Maybe tell people about Clan Wars before we end this one, because I know Clan Wars is like the big one in Ireland, right?
Yeah. So Clan Wars is and I hope I don't get shit for this. I'm gonna say the number one promotion. Obviously, there's gonna be a dispute on this, right? But the number one promotion, as far as amateur MMA goes, they do have again pro fights at the top of the card. One or two pro fights. So you can call it like a semi-pro promotion, I guess, or something. But yeah, they are the number one promotion for amateur MMA. They are very consistent. They have a show running about every 2-3 months. They have a show going, which then gives amateurs more opportunity to compete all the time. Um, yeah, like, well, what else do you want me to
Who's the
say about this
promoter of
fight?
Clan Wars?
Who's the promoter? Paul. Shit, you just got me there. Paul. It's Paul. Paul. Paul from IFS. Totally forgot his last name. Paul Mac. Mac. Yeah, I think. Yeah, sorry, man. Yeah, it's Paul. Paul is the guy running Clan Rush. There you go.
And what's the pro promotion there?
Uh, what do you mean? Sorry, pro promotion.
Well, besides Clan Wars, you said they're the number one.
Right. So, you have Clan Wars. You have. I'm gonna go from north to south, right? You have Chaos Fighting Championship, which is the oldest promotion out of Ireland and North, so out of both countries. This is where the likes of Conor McGregor, James Gallagher, Peter Queally, Brian Moore, Sinead Kavanagh. They all had, amateur and pro fights in this promotion. So that's Chaos Fighting Championship, which they now have started the Chaos Grappling as well, in addition to it. It's like an invitational kind of show. So there's those two. There's Your Fighting Championship, which had their sixth edition. It's ran by Decky McAleenan, who's a professional fighter for Cage Warriors. He's going to be fighting on the same card as Rhys McKee. That's a great show. There's the Fight Project, which is Rhys McKee promotion. He just started as well, running his own promotion. So 1, 2, 3, 4. All those four, they have amateurs and pro fights. Okay. And then in the south, you have Cage Legacy. You have Premier Fighting Championship. You have Air FC. Air spelled EIRE, which is another way to say Ireland, or Ireland in Irish. It's Air. Trying to think here. Hope I'm not forgetting any. Yeah, I don't think I'm forgetting any promotion.
So the graduation, so to speak, is Cage Warriors. Am I right?
Yes.
From
So you
amateur
move
to
from
pro.
you go from amateur to pro. It can happen in these shows, like I said, right? So you have the pro debut in one of these shows. I'll give an example. Solomon Simon, he's going to be fighting at Cage Warriors. He had his pro debut at Premier FC, and now he's going to go into Cage Warriors as a 1-0. Oh, Cage Conflict. That's the other promotion I couldn't remember. Alexander O'Sullivan also had his pro debut on that show, and now he's going to be fighting at Cage Warriors as well. So that's going to be his second fight as a pro. Okay.
Yeah, so it seems like almost like guys only have the amateurs and then maybe fight 1 or 2 times before Cage Warriors. Am I right about
Or
that?
Bellator. Yeah. So Cage Warriors or Bellator. And again, they could and can get fights in some of the UK shows instead, So like FCC, Full Contact Contenders, they are now under the UFC Fight Pass as well. There's a lot of the Irish fighters that just go over to England and fight in England. Sometimes they can't find a fight here, or it's too long to wait until Cage Warriors comes back or whatever. So they just go over to England and fight over there. There's shows like Almighty Fighting Championship, UKFC, and again, I'm sure there's a few others, but there's a guy called Leon Hill who's 4-1 now, riding a 4-fight win streak. His first fight as a pro, just lost by decision. He went to Almighty, and then he fought on Rhys McKee's show, the Fight Project, and now he's getting the call to come back to Cage Warriors. I think his first loss was at Cage Warriors or something. So then he had to go and fight on the other regional shows, and now he's coming back to Cage Warriors at 4-1. Yeah. So Cage Warriors obviously the biggest UK and Ireland show. Bellator is more like a worldwide show. You know, yeah. Cage Warriors, I still see it as that mid league to feed into the UFC, right? Where you can get into Bellator and just fight in Bellator throughout your whole career if you want to, right? You don't have to go anywhere else if you want to. You can just stay there forever. Where Cage Warriors, you can't really make a career out of it. It's more like a stepping stone into getting into the UFC. So yeah.
Have you been are you going to start covering Cage Warriors more to try and get
Yeah,
the next bridge
yeah,
to the UFC maybe?
yeah. So I covered the Cage Warriors, like I said earlier on the podcast. I got the media credentials to cover the one in Belfast, right? And the only reason that I got, which was part of the application process, was to send examples of interviews or articles that we had done with fighters competing in Cage Warriors specifically. And I had so many examples to give because I had been covering a lot of the fighters, from Ireland that are now competing in Cage Warriors, even before they were competing in Cage Warriors. So I had like a ton of interviews that I just sent them over, so they could see I wasn't just, trying to apply for this event because of one fighter or this and that stuff. I've actually been covering a lot of the fighters for a long time, which are now happening to fight at Cage Warriors. So if you don't mind me, like I'll just give you the list here. So at the event that's going to happen in Dublin, you have Solomon Simon, like I said. So he's Team Rhino, 1-0. You have Alexander O'Sullivan, 1-0 as well. This guy is or was one of the best amateur fighters coming out of Ireland. He racked up 30 amateur fights before going pro, with a record of 20-10, including silver medal at the IMAFs, I'm going to say. Yes, so silver medal at the IMAFs. So this guy is like legit prospect. He was my first ever guest as well on the podcast. Um, still as an amateur, so I saw him turning pro. Now he's going in Cage Warriors. Solomon Simon, again, been following him since, I don't know, his last 5 or 6 fights as an amateur, and now he's turned pro. Leon Hill is the guy that I told you who's 4-1. He's Team KF. Ryan Shelley, also coming out of Team KF, 6-0. And then, yeah, Reese McKee from Next Generation. So just by looking at this list alone, 3 of the gyms that I've mentioned are in there. Cage Warriors, as you can see, they don't hire any SPG fighters. And that's because of a fallout that happened with John Kavanagh directly. So SPG, you will not see them in Cage Warriors anymore.
Politics.
Yeah, which is why they are going with Bellator. So SPG is pushing guys into Bellator, where Cage Warriors is like open door to everybody else, pretty much apart from SPG. So you get guys from all the other 3 teams that I mentioned competing. Yeah, under Cage Warriors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like I said, I figured that, Bellator having a footprint in Ireland was because they have some sort of deal with someone there.
Again, you go to one of these events, and obviously most of the fighters, like I said, are all SPG, which is a gym based in Dublin, right? Um, and the event is happening in Dublin, so it's like they just bring everybody, your friends, your cousins, your like family, the friends of friends and family of everybody. They just bring everybody, and the Irish, they really support each other really well. So I kind of get the feeling that they don't really care much for who's competing. It's more like, let's support all the fighters who are competing at this big event. Obviously, they want to see whoever they know, or and then root for them, but they will stay and root for everybody else after that.
Yeah, I'd say Bellator has more of a print in Ireland than the UFC does.
Oh yeah, easily, easily.
Yeah.
Because the UFC only came here once, I think, to Ireland once.
Yeah, and it was a successful show, and then
Never again. Yeah. Which I
didn't
don't
make
understand.
sense.
Yeah, I really don't understand. Yeah.
Mhm.
But anyway, I'm just setting myself up so that whenever they do come back and they decide to come back, I'm there. I'll be there. That will happen, 100%, no doubt.
Well, Manuel, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. This is an awesome first episode. And whenever you have a few more stories you want to cover, maybe talk a little bit about Prospect MMA before we let you go.
Well, yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Obviously, appreciate that. Giving me a chance to let more people know about the Irish MMA scene. There's a lot of guys, like I said, that deserve to have that spotlight. So that's awesome. Thanks for that. Prospect MMA podcast. My podcast is very unusual in the sense of you will not find me under the podcast platforms. You'll find me on Instagram where I do my podcast live, and all the followers from my guests to myself, they can interact with us live, submit questions, comments, that kind of stuff. So follow me at Prospect MMA Podcast everywhere, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, etc. That's where you'll find all my stuff. Prospect MMA Podcast.
All right. So for everybody checking out the Irish MMA update, keep an eye out for Emmanuel Thompson coming up. Take care.
That's it. Thank you.